This time I'm going to repair this broken down console lid from my 94 S10 Blazer. Like a lot of cars from the 80s and 90s, the back side of this is all plastic, and over the years the pressure from putting your arm on it, leaning on it, climbing in and out of the car has broken the plastic in a bunch of pieces, and the structure is mostly gone. It's pretty busted up underneath there, so it's not very good to put your arm on anymore, and it doesn't look very good in the car either. First and foremost, I'm going to take this apart and start putting the plastic structure underneath back together. I got a couple different products here. One that I've used a whole bunch before, a little bit of JB Weld plastic bonder. I've also got something from JB Weld that I've never used before, plastic weld. It's an epoxy putty. And then one other thing here on the top of this, it's a rubberized plastic, pretty common material in the interior of a car. I don't know if you can see here, but it is pretty yellow on top. It's pretty dirty. I've cleaned it many times in the past, but the yellowing does not really go away with normal cleaning. So once I've got the plastic back together, I've got another little tip, another little trick I'm going to try with that, and that is peroxide cream developer. Actually, this is actually a hair product to put highlights in your hair or bleach your hair, I believe. And I saw some other videos, was reading about RetroBrite and using peroxide to clean up yellowed plastic. So I want to go ahead and try that on the top here, and we'll see how that works as well. But first, let's go ahead and start taking this apart so I can get to the plastic structure underneath here. Take those 5 out, and then this piece lifts away. And this is actually the piece that had the hinged part on it to begin with. So we'll set that aside there. Then underneath here is the structure underneath. You can see where a bunch of these pieces are already broken off. It's all cracked and broken. So next up, I'm going to need to peel this rubber, plastic, whatever it is, coating off of the top, so that I can just work with the plastic structure itself. So I want to do this very gently. Obviously this is all glued together from the factory. Try not to destroy the plastic any more than it already is. Probably have to use some kind of flat blade or something to get in between the plastic and the foam there. Just be careful that you don't poke through the other side. I don't think there's any chance of saving the foam that's in here. I'm just going to have to go to the fabric store and get another piece, and that's probably going to be the best way to do it. But we'll see once I get it all apart. Alright, well there you can see the foam, what's left of the foam, and then also the top of it here, rubber plastic part. And then here is what is left of the plastic base. So it's got a couple of big cracks here. Obviously this is all missing. I've got part of it there. Fortunately the part for the screw to screw the pieces back together did survive, so I'll get that back in there. So next step is going to be cleaning this all up to prepare it for epoxy. Alright, now that I've got most of the foam cleaned off of that, I'm going to go ahead and use some tape to try to build it back up, or give me something to adhere some of the other plastic pieces to before I start with the epoxy. So this is where it starts getting tricky. You got all these pieces here, and certain sections line up perfectly, but then there are gaps, and I'm missing some of the plastic pieces have disappeared over the years. So what I'm going to do, and the best way to do this in my opinion, is to take the bigger pieces that do line up, and we're going to epoxy those together first, try to make that a whole piece, make that nice and solid, and then we'll reinsert it into the rest here. So like most of the time when you're trying to fix cracks or fill something in, we need to give it a little bit of a channel in there where the cracks are to give the filler, give the epoxy something to set up in, something to grab onto. So I've got a little bitty carbide bit here on my Dremel, and I'm just going to go over the backs of where these cracks are and make a little bit of a groove. Now that I've got that all roughed up and grooved where all the little cracks are, I can go ahead and get started with the epoxy, put a little bit in there in those areas. Oh, missed one. Alright, so I've got this down to basically just two large pieces here. There's one little tiny piece that I'm not really sure where that goes, so that may or may not go back in. But I did run into a little problem here. This is pretty typical if you're doing this kind of stuff because nothing ever goes back perfect. And trying to get the last big piece inside here. It fits on the one side, but then I'm hitting over here. And I can't quite get these two pieces to line up. There's just a little bit of extra material there. Probably because I left a gap here when I put this piece back on. Just a slight gap. But so I'm just going to take the Dremel again and go ahead and grind a little bit of that down and try to make this fit better. Alright, well I think that's pretty good. Now I just need to try to anchor all this together before I start putting the last coat of epoxy on those cracks. And then after that, I'll work on filling in the rest of it that's missing there. Alright, I'm going to try some of this putty now, see how that works. Alright, so now the putty's all in there. Got it weighted down a little bit to try to flatten out that joint. So now I just need to let that set up, which I guess is going to take at least 25 minutes and then a couple hours to cure. Once it's set up, I'll come back and put some more of the other plastic bonder stuff on there and see how it turned out. Alright, so it's full 24 hours later here now. I went ahead and wanted to let this cure as long as possible. The black JB Weld, for whatever reason, didn't mix quite right, or stuff didn't come out with the hardener catalyst in the right proportions. So some of it's not as sturdy as it normally is, and especially since I put so much right here, and since that's where my arm goes, I want to build that back up a little bit more. So now that this has all had a chance to really fully dry and cure, I'm going to go back and work on building this up a little bit more with the Bondo. And the other thing, since this is basically a two-piece lid, the bottom part here, I went ahead and screwed that back in to hold everything tight and in alignment as much as possible when this was setting. So that actually does make it a fair bit stronger, having the bottom piece on here too. Then the other thing here with the top portion, all of the foam that was in there is attached to this, or was attached to this. You can see here that it's basically turned to dust. So I want to try to preserve these corners as much as possible because they're still intact and they have a shape to them. And that shape's going to be hard to recreate with something else and make it all stick together. So I'm going to try to leave those. I'm going to try to cut out the center section and most of the sides here. And then I'm going to take this out and work on cleaning this and try to get rid of some of the yellowing. But then also going to go to the fabric store and see if I can find some other foam to rebuild this with. Alright, outside here now with the console lid, I went ahead and on about half of it here have used the peroxide developer hair cream stuff that I got. And then all the videos I watched on this said to cover it up so it doesn't dry out and then let it sit here in the sun for a while. So we'll see on the half of it here how it does. If it gets the yellow out, I'll come back out here in a little while and check on it, and if it looks good, then I will do the other side here. Not sure how well you can see that, but it's actually, see, this is the front here, so this is where it was the worst. It's actually much lighter than it was after 2 coats of the stuff. This is where I tested it first, so that's cleaner there. And obviously where the saran wrap didn't make contact, it didn't work as well. So I will need to do that again, but I brought it back in for now. Time to work on the Bondo here. Oh, that smell. So it probably goes without saying, if you've ever watched anything related to automotive, then you know this, but want about a golf ball sized thing of Bondo there. And then for that, we want about a pea-sized thing of hardener. Just like the JP Weld stuff, you want it mixed so that it's uniform and it's all the same color. Oh, I forgot how much this stuff stinks. And just start building up the low spots. Like anytime you're using filler here, you probably want to be careful not to do too much, because then it'll take you forever to sand back through it all. So just make it a nice medium thin coat, focusing on the lowest spot. Alright, well that didn't turn out quite as well as I wanted. Should probably note that it's about, I don't know, 85, 90 degrees and probably 70% humidity in the garage right now. So not the best conditions for this kind of stuff, but we'll make do. There you go. It doesn't look very pretty, but that's what the sandpaper is for. So we'll let this go off and come back later and sand it down and then do at least one more coat and repeat the whole process. Okay, I put the cover back on here just to test fit it and make sure that everything fit back together well, and it does. Actually, I put it back in the, and it's much more solid. It feels great in there. I did cut the rest of the foam out except for the corner pieces. There's a little bit here and just a little bit here that I left in there, so I didn't have to recreate the 4 corners like I said earlier. And then I just went up to Jo-Ann Fabrics, and I couldn't find exactly what I was looking for here. Here's a piece of the foam I cut out. So I was trying to find something similar to that. There wasn't anything that was really perfect. There was some like carpet type padding that was very close, but it wasn't really as firm. So what I did was, they have these thin foam sheets. They're like 2 millimeters thick. So I got 5 of those, and my plan is to glue them together, but the 5 of them together are, they've got give to it, but it's nice and solid there, so I think that'll feel nice, and I think I can get that to match. It's pretty close to the same height as the original foam, so, and I can always take one of these out and just use 4 of them if I need to. So pop this cover back off of here and get to work on test fitting the foam, and if it's all good, then I will glue it back together. So here's the foam all cut. I went ahead and layered it up, cut one piece at a time to kind of fit around where the existing foam was, and then I just kept stacking that up. It took about 4 layers of the foam to get it even with the foam that was already here. In fact, I could almost fit another one in there, but it's pretty tight on there as is. I had it test fit before, and it works pretty well. So now I'm just going to glue these layers down to the lid. I think I'm gonna not put any glue on this side, not glue it down to the base here, but just glue everything to the cover. portion. So I'm going to glue that down, and then I will put it all back together, and we'll see how it turned out. So here's the finished product. I did do another pass or two with the peroxide cream to get more of the yellowing out there. Actually turned out pretty well, I think. It's the nicest it's looked. So it's all built back up with the foam here. Looks pretty even. The seam's right about here, but you can't really see it, so I'd call that a success. And here it is back in the car, so it looks pretty good. You know, it's still not 100% perfect, but it's definitely looks a lot nicer than it did, and it feels a lot nicer than it did. So now we just have to see how well it stands up to the test of time.